Okay, Ron, your computer clock and my computer clock are actually synchronized.
Wow.
Which is good. We're obviously in the same time zone for once.
Might as well just mention my shared screen and the Zoom. Hopefully everybody's familiar with Zoom. The main point with the little animated guide that we've got showing is that you'll want to open the text chat, and you may want to open the participants panel so you can see who's here, and so that you can pose questions and answer questions via the text chat. It's 1 o'clock. We're already recording the webinar, so we'll get started. And for those of you that have been to our previous webinars, we had the original series that was a funded European project. Then we reran all of the topics under the banner of Reactivated. And now we're doing it again between 2022 and 2024 under the banner of Reflected. The idea is that they're more reflected, more reflective of maturity in the various topics, and to share what's changed since and the ongoing evolution of the various topics and practice and so on. So we're not sharing a direct resource as we did previously, or the kind of interactive resource, but that's all still available, and we'll put the link in the text chat, or I'll put the link in the text chat now to the page. It's the same page where you're registered. And we have this little panel now to represent what's happening in this webinar. So a quick introduction or welcome to and summary that we're running these reflected sessions. There's a panel that's about us and the usual presenters and our new colleagues, Rosemary and Teresa. And then we've got the list of guest speakers, and there'll be some information that's already available here, but then also, if appropriate, we'll add links to presentations and so on after the webinar. And then there's a panel that we'll come on to later, that, you know, what you might do as actions and what next. So I think we're going to skip past, Alistair, the summary of what people said they want to learn, because it's all kind of fairly familiar and predictable, isn't it?
Well, I think, yes, the key thing that came out a lot was the desire to see what's changed over 2 years of the pandemic. And then the other thing, many people looking for models and frameworks to base their learning on, and you'll find that in the Xerte resource, which is on the link, the page that Ron's put in there already, and I'll put in here again. So if you look through that at your leisure, you'll find, and there's also quite a lot on models and frameworks in some of our other series, which you can get to all of them from the drop down box on the page that I've just sent you to. So there are other sessions on online, on course design, activity design, and so on.
And if you are new, there's obviously the recordings from March 2017 and then again 2019, and the recording from today's session will be added to this page probably middle of next week or something, once we've tweaked the odd edit and so on. So I think we're ready. We've got 72 people in the room. There's about 135 that have registered. So we're ready to proceed with our first guest speaker. I'll stop my screen sharing.
And I would just say a very big thank you. We're really pleased to welcome Dr. Deepika Kohli. And Deepika's going to explain to us some of the ways she's been using online learning to prepare teachers for teaching online, and that was an area we thought that could be really interesting to folk. So Deepika, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So
yeah, we can see the
topic
screen.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. So greetings to all everyone here. The topic which I am touching about is online learning, because here we need to redefine the role of a teacher. Teacher is not only a an instructor. Now the role of the teacher has shifted from instructor to facilitator. So I'm touching some of the experiences of mine during this COVID period. But the one most important thing is why I took this, why I'm interested in this presentation, because there is some idea behind it, some motivation behind it. That is because of this COVID period. Now, if I talk about the COVID period, it is not just a problem or a challenge to all of us, it is also an opportunity, because it's an opportunity where we can develop the teacher's competency to deal with the digital era. So the basic idea behind is, as we all know, that during 2020, the World Health Organization that classified COVID-19 as a global pandemic. And during that period, the whole education system was shut down. And we have to be apart from our learners and the students. And one of the most important sector which was affected at that time was educational system. And I think that gave rise to emergency remote teaching, and which is very much in practice nowadays. And being a teacher, we have faced different kind of challenges. If I talk about my experiences, because I deal with the teachers, would be teachers, the teachers who yet to step it into the teaching professions. So because we have to develop their competency, we have to develop their skills, because we are not just to share the content with the teachers, but the basic challenge was to develop their competency. For that purpose, it was important at that time period to facilitate our teachers. So the major challenges at that time was that how to share our content, how to share our resources, how to assess them, how we can collaborate with them, because they are from the distant places and we are not able to contact them physically. And it is very much important to support them. Now, why this was a challenge? Because there was a very less medias which can help us to connect with our learners or the would-be teachers. And why do we need to share, assess, or collaborate with them? The basic purpose is because when the things go back to normal, like the present time, almost the normalized conditions are there. Our students or our teacher or would-be teachers, they are really thankful to us, because at that time we use the pedagogy of care and pedagogy of that compassion at that period of time. Now, the basic challenges for us during that period of time was to balance the diverse learning needs of the learners. Here, I just want to mention the learners for us is the would-be teachers, because I'm from the teacher educational institutions, and my learner is the would-be teacher or the teacher who yet to be in a teaching profession. So it is very much difficult for us to balance their or to cater to their diverse need, because we are not connecting face to face, we are dealing online. Second, it was very important to select the important and appropriate mobile friendly e-tools, because here what happened, there are some learners or some teachers who are from the distance places, or we can say they are from the rural areas, the areas which are not well developed, and the internet connections are really poor, and they are not access to that laptops and the smartphones, like they have a simple mobile phone. And at that period of time, we were facing that challenge to reach out to them, and moreover reach out to their parents, because what happened at that time, there are some families where they are using only 2 or 3 mobile phones. If they are 4 members in a home, they have only 2 mobile phones, and we have to adjust our timing accordingly when they are getting their phone from the parents, because no doubt the parents are also working and they are also the would-be teacher. Everybody needs that technology, but there are some areas or the families, they are not able to you know that they are not able to afford that. And the next challenge we faced, the regular personal contact with the students and their parents. Now, what was the solution? I'm talking about that period of time, and if the situation arises in the near future, the what could be the solutions which we can think over it, which can help us in the near future also. At that time period, we thought of that we should prepare our teacher to teach online. Earlier, it was not there. We were not focusing more on the digital teaching. We were focusing on the face-to-face teaching. So preparing teacher to teach online was one of the solution. and also to develop their competencies and their skills, so that if we can develop their competency, we can develop their skills, it will help them to contact with their student. Because our purpose is not just to deliver the content, not just to sending the resources or the content or the syllabus. The purpose was to help the learners, to help our teachers to grasp everything slowly, but with a positive mental balance. And the one of the most focused area was mobile friendly delivery, because everybody was not accessible to computers and the laptops. And this was my major focus at that period of time, or last 2 years, that how I can assist my would-be teachers to deliver their content, to help their students through the mobile phones. And then the very challenging reach out to their parents, because we need their help, we need their cooperation if we want to run the online classes very smoothly. Now, if I talk about developing teachers' competency, because now we are preparing the teachers for a digital era. So, if we talk about digital era, here the teacher must know the different tools, different techniques, different ways to approach their learners. Now, I'll share some of my work and experiences which I used during the past 2 years. First of all, if I talk about online content delivery, how I moved toward this, that is, I used Google Classroom. So this was my Google Classroom. This is a wonderful LMS where I created different classes. Then these were some of the glimpses of the WhatsApp group which I used. This is my student feedback related to.
Hello everyone, my name is Muskan Mahajan and I am the student of B.Ed M.Ed Integrated Semester 6 from Khalsa College of Education, GT Road, Amritsar, and I am here to tell you about my experience of online teaching of skills during pandemic. And it was not possible without our teachers who are amazingly talented. For that purpose, they divided our class into the smaller groups where one student used to perform all the activities like a teacher. For example, sharing of screen, for example, sharing of whiteboards, using links, everything. And rest of the students acted like normal classroom students who used to interact with the teacher or interact with the student who is acting like a teacher. And it was all amazing, and this is how our college took the initiative to promote the education and didn't let us education suffer. Thank you.
So this was the experience of my learner. So this was the Canvas platform where we launched the MOOC course. It is for the professional development of for the would-be teachers, and it was related to the innovative pedagogical strategies for gifted learners and slow learners. Our focus was only on the gifted and slow learners at that period of time. So we engaged the learners with the help of different kind of activities. So this is the upcoming MOOC that will be launched in the next month, Creativity in School Education. Then we have made class representative and discipline committees and monitors also. We regularly in contact with our class representative who convey the problems of the learners through the mobile, through the WhatsApp group. And we share the various resources and notices through the WhatsApp group. And this was the CR group on Google Classroom also to share the assignments. How we involve them with the help of Telegram and with the help of other platforms. Like this is a Telegram. You can see the screenshot. So this is the Google Jamboard. Everybody must know about this. We try to engage them with the help of Google Jamboard. It's idea boards where we used to collaborate them and get their ideas on the different topics. So we have created YouTube channel also, and we also used to send the screen recording in an English language as well as in the regional language. Our regional language here is the Punjabi. So how we took the attendance at that period of time, we used to send the Google form just for 1 or 2 minutes. We opened it, and after that we closed it. How we do the online assessments?
Hi, I am Mamta Nanda, student of Khalsa College of Education, Amritsar. Today I would like to share my views of online teaching during the toughest phase, that is COVID-19. It was our teachers who put immense efforts to make sure that our education does not get collapsed. She used to make WhatsApp groups and ask us to explain a topic, and we have to send her back within the allotted time. Even there were Google Classrooms, and we could send our assignments through emails and even podcast. There was Zoom meetings, regular Zoom meetings, through which our supervision was done by the teachers. We are obliged that it was technology and the teachers who didn't let us drown in such a frightful phase. Thank you. Hi.
So these were some of the quizzes which we used to arrange on Canvas as well as through the Google form. Testimos I also used for them to calculating their percentage of scores. So email also we used to collect their papers, Zoom meetings, regular Zoom meetings. So we have some good parents also.
Hi, I am Amanpreet Kaur.
You can have a look. This is a representative respected parents group. We have made the CR group parents groups also.
I am mother of 2 kids. My one kid is school going. She is very active, confident, and she has good pickup. But COVID-19 and online learning affect her. I know all the students have been affected. Online learning can't substitute the immersive experience of school education. A student's overall psychosocial development takes place in the school. Overall development consists of social and challenging environment, engagement, communication, value education, group work and play. But during pandemic period, students are feeling demotivated and insecure. A negative effect of COVID-19 can be seen in many ways. The pandemic has had its impact on students' life. Thanks.
Yeah. So this is all about the PowerPoint. Now I'll show you the platform. So this is one of the most important thing. This is our MOOC, which we done on innovative pedagogies for exceptional learner. And we put focus on gifted and slow learners. So there were total 6 modules, module 1, and every module was followed by a quiz. There was a weekly quiz, and this MOOC was for 1 month. This was a self-paced MOOC. So these were the 3. So total was 6 modules. It is of 30 hours and 2 credits. Now, how we encourage the discussions, you can see here. So these were the regular activities we used to conduct. And one of the most important thing is they can access the Canvas through their mobile phones. Along with this, we used to regularly put all the information on this group. This is a Telegram group where we try to connect with them. So this I want to show. This is our WhatsApp groups, which it's I think approximately 20 WhatsApp groups.
Deepika, we're out of time now, so if you could just wrap up quickly, that would be great. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I just want to mention that it was really a tough and challenging phase as at that period of time, but we tried our best to reach to our learners. If they are from the distance places also, we try to contact their parents that kindly with them. So every problem has a solution and we make it. We try to solve the problems of the learners, our would-be teachers.
That's great. And we recognise what an immensely challenging environment that is as well. It has been in the UK. In your context with the rural students and so on, we really recognise that. And I do encourage people to have a look at the presentation, which you sent me the link for already. We'll make sure that's on the site. So thank you very much. Deepika, there are some questions in the chat and there may be some others coming in. Now I'm going to pass over to Rosemary, who's going to introduce Alison.
So I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Allison Gilmore, who is a senior lecturer in learning transformation at the University of West of Scotland. And leading nicely on from Deepika's mention of pedagogy of care, Alison's going to talk about using a pedagogy of kindness when teaching online. So over to you, Alison.
Thanks very much, Rosemary. It's really good to be able to join the conversation today. And as Rosemary said, I'm going to be reflecting on the approach of using a pedagogy of kindness when teaching online, very much in the context of the pandemic, but drawing on some of the experiences I'd had before the pandemic in terms of teaching online. Just for some context, in my day job, I am a lecturer in learning transformation, but it's an academic development type role situated within a centralised learning and teaching department. And of course, when we went into the start of the pandemic in the United Kingdom, I was working a lot with lecturers around how they could move their teaching online under quite a lot of pressure. And very much reinforcing with them the importance of how we build community amongst students, how we need to be really conscious of that process of socialising our students into online spaces. And if we don't get these things right and we don't invest in these things as we design our online teaching, it can really shape the ways in which students engage. So, you know, some of us here will be very familiar with the likes of Salmon's 5 steps and how you spend that time orienting your students into online learning and socializing them into online spaces. So that's always been something that's been quite important to me. As a teacher and as an academic developer when I'm working with others in terms of how they design online learning. But of course, as we went into the pandemic, I became more and more aware, and as we saw this across the sector, of the issue of well-being, well-being of students and well-being of staff in this context. And I think that very much then started to frame my thinking of how do we as educators support well-being in the design and facilitation of our online teaching. That very much sets the context for what I wanted to share today. And what I'm going to be reflecting on is, as an academic in the academic development role, I was thinking about these issues, but it really made me think about the other type of teaching that I do, which is a sort of part-time teaching with the Open University, which is the UK's largest distance learning provider, with quite a diverse student body. And quite a mature student body with lots of kind of adults maybe returning to education. And that's the sort of, it was that distance learning context, which I think really made me think a bit more about, well, how could a pedagogy of kindness be used in my own teaching practice to think about these issues of how we support people to engage effectively in online teaching, how I support the well-being of my students and also myself during the pandemic. And I think it was the circumstances of the pandemic, without stating the absolute obvious, I think they made me really conscious of we were all in this awful context, and it really made me think a bit more about that shared experience during the pandemic. So, as I say, I've always kind of been focused on how I socialise students into online learning, but I started to think a bit more about a pedagogy of kindness and what does this mean? And I came across the work of Catherine Denial, and she frames a pedagogy of kindness around asking us to apply compassion in every situation we can and not to default to suspicion or anger. So I wanted to just take some time just to say, okay, what do we really mean by a pedagogy of kindness? And I think we have these issues of trust. Do we trust our students? Is there an equity in the relationship that we have with our students and who we are as kind of learning partners when we go into a classroom, whether that's a physical classroom, whether it's an online classroom, and whether it's in the virtual learning environment? Where is that equity, and how do we really foster that sense of equity premised on a relationship of trust? Very much related to that, Denial points to compassion, and I'll pick up a bit later on really what I understand by compassion. And also care for others. So you could see a pedagogy of kindness sitting within a broader landscape of embedding wellbeing in the curriculum. There's been quite a lot of emphasis on this within the UK context, the UK higher education context. And supporting us to think about embedding wellbeing in the curriculum is about looking at how what we do within the learning and teaching space that supports well-being. It's not about us as educators encroaching into what may be student support expertise or mental health expertise. It's what we do within the curriculum, what we do in the classroom, what we do online in their learning and teaching with that hat on, and how that supports well-being. So again, I'll kind of come back to this. I think it points through over the next few slides. But ultimately, it's like, how does our design of learning, how do we really support the circumstances under which learning can happen? That's what denial kind of phrases it as. So how do we create a classroom context? And when I use the word classroom, I see that as our virtual learning environment, as our digital, as our live online classes, and as our physical classes. They are all different types of learning environments. So how do we in these learning environments create supportive, respectful, compassionate spaces? So what I'm going to do, having sort of outlined a pedagogy of kindness, I just want to point to some practical examples that I then introduced in my own practice during the pandemic. Now, some of you are going to look at these and think, I already do this. So what I'm encouraging you to do is almost like think about a different lens on these practices as you think about those themes of trust, equity, care, compassion. So during the pandemic, I certainly decided to make more use of audio and video within my online teaching. Now, like many of us, I was doing that already, but what I really mean is, instead of communicating a lot with my students via email, forum posts, like text-based communications, the pandemic had put us into a context where many of us were at home. There was that sense of isolation. So how could I bridge that isolation? How could I humanize some of my communications with learners? And I really felt that ability for the learners to hear my voice, to see me, that these types of things, it was about humanizing those communications with my students. Those of us who are familiar with the likes of Moore will know that within online teaching, we're looking at how do we reduce what we call the transactional distance. So what I was doing was part of reducing that sense of transactional distance between the learners and myself in terms of communication, but it was also about humanizing those connections. I think that's one of the key things to promote here: humanizing, supporting belonging, and supporting that sense of connection with my students. If I move on to another example, if I reflected really, really critically about my own teaching practice prior to the pandemic, what I realised was I was doing a lot of setting the expectations for my students in terms of, this is how you should engage, this is what I'm kind of expecting around online classes, or how you should engage in the forums. Like, I was doing a lot of setting that for them, doing that to them. That's me being really open if I reflected critically about myself. But during the pandemic, I thought, well, how do I counter that? If a pedagogy of kindness pushes me to really, really think about my students as sort of equitable partners in this relationship, how can I use some of the activities online to build this shared on like a more open exploration of how they should engage online, and how they can also support the building of this really engaging, active, supportive learning space. So again, not totally novel ideas, but just thinking about them in a different way. One of the things was about the use of Mentimeter as a student response system, and I decided to use things like Mentimeter, not just to explore content, but also to explore the issues of engagement with staff, engagement with students, and how they might want to engage online, how they might expect their teachers to engage online, how they may expect their peers to engage online. And from that, using Mentimeter to explore those themes with them, taking that into a live classroom discussion to explore these issues in more detail, we then co-constructed our classroom netiquette, our forum netiquette. We co-constructed the sense of what it meant to engage. Similarly, Stop, Start, Continue is an activity some people will be well aware of, an activity that some of us may do in the middle of our module. What do you want to start? What do you want to stop? What do you want to continue? So running that with our students. But again, rather than it just being, okay, give me feedback, what do you want to tell me? I use that activity to explore their viewpoints on what they want to stop doing themselves, what they want to start doing themselves, what they want to continue doing. So it was it was not just about them feeding back, but it was about how we together kind of co-construct this sense of creating a participatory classroom, a respectful classroom, helping them see their sense of agency in building this respectful online learning space. And I was really consciously using that type of language in discussing these topics with my students, that they were kind of actively creating this space as much as me. Moving on, this kind of relates to this next slide about building compassionate spaces. Within my teaching with the Open Universities and the social sciences, we need to be able to explore at times topics that can be quite divergent, but there can be divergent perspectives, there can be debate, they can be emotive. That can be really challenging with it when you're teaching online. You've got a group of students, no one has their cameras on, we're not getting the verbal cues. These things can all make that difficult. But as we know, how do you sow the seeds? How do you prepare the context in which people can learn before the class and around the classes, so that when they come in, they feel comfortable to have these types of conversations? Again, I made use of Mentimeter, not just for that module content discussions, not just for the activation of knowledge before the class or consolidation of knowledge afterwards. I used kind of different types of activities in Mentimeter, and sometimes also using cloud-based spaces like kind of Google Forms and things like that. To really force students to ask themselves about how do they contribute to this compassionate space? How do they support respectful dialogue about difficult conversations? How do they support others to engage in different ways? I'm going to touch here on compassion, because what do we really mean by that? And Paul Gilbert and also Theo Gilbert are both academics who've written quite a lot in this field. And Paul Gilbert's concept of compassion is about noticing, not normalising, the distress of others, and then being able to act on that and do something about it. So again, I explored that concept of compassion with my students. Like, what do they do to support not just themselves to participate, but their peers who may be in very, very different material environments, very, very different material circumstances during the pandemic, but how are they compassionate to others? And that relates to Theo Gilbert's concept of compassion-focused pedagogy, which is all about how do we develop what he calls the micro communication skills of compassion amongst my students. So again, lots of us will think, okay, well, how do we support students with the skills to be able to learn online? Lots of us focus on that when we're designing our online teaching, but I moved very much to thinking about how do we support those micro communication skills of compassion. In terms of time, I'm just going to signpost quickly. Another approach that I took was how we normalise challenge amongst students. Using the students' response system in Mentimeter, one of the ways I do that is I always include an option for I don't know, or I don't know where to find that answer. I always include an option for it's okay to say I don't know where this is. So that's just now par for the course for me. But another way of normalising challenge, as many of us will know, is also role modelling our experiences of negotiating challenge as a teacher during the pandemic, maybe some of the difficulties I was experiencing, but also as a learner, how hard I found referencing, how hard I found it to log into that Zoom call. I think if you feel comfortable, normalising challenge can be quite powerful to students in terms of building quite open and equitable learning spaces and creating that sense of psychological safety, as Gareth Hughes calls it. So finally, lots of you will be doing these things already. You'll be using audio and video, you'll be using student response systems. But what I'd ask you to do is, would you use them differently? If you ask yourself that question, how can I take a lens of a pedagogy of kindness onto my own practice? And I would say these things that I have done have really supported student engagement in the classroom in terms of really active participation, but also students helping each other out and being okay with, well, Alison doesn't have her camera on today, but she wants to come on the microphone. That's fine. These different types of participation are fine, not least in the context of the pandemic. So that's my final comment. Like, changes to one element or one aspect of your practice aren't enough. You need to look at it across your online learning and teaching. So I'll finish there.
That's great. Thank you very much. Lots of questions in there that you might want to look at, Alison, and comments. And thank you also. Deepika's been keeping some responses to different people's questions. We will have a session towards the end, where it's open mic and we can just concentrate on the questions and the debate. But for now, Lillian. If Lillian's
that might
there.
be me actually, Alison.
Oh, is that you instead of Lillian? That's you.
Yes.
Okay.
So I am very delighted to welcome our two final presenters. So first of all, we have Freya Atkins, who is a theatre, film and interactive media student. And following her in a moment will be Irene Garcia Munoz, who is also a student at University of York. So just really delighted that you're going to come and share your student experiences. So without any further ado, you've both got your 6 minutes. Over to you, Freya, first.
Hi, well, firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about it. So essentially online learning, as I imagine most people who here are aware, was a massive change, but I just wanted to firstly shed light on some of the positive things that came out of it. I'm a visually impaired student and a massive advocate for the disabled community at York. And I suppose firstly what I wanted to say was some of the positives that came out of it were, firstly, there was an element of convenience to it. I suppose in terms of fatigue and physical access, that was much improved by it. And also things like lecture recordings were fantastic, especially when they were transcribed properly and so on, so on. For me personally, it gave me the opportunity to pause on a slide and read it and do it a little bit slower, because sometimes when I'm in a lecture theatre, which I've experienced since, bizarre, it's very much, I get very lost. So keeping them recorded was something that really benefited me. Also, so that for me, I think was better, and that's something I want to stay and continue on as we gradually go back into in-person teaching. But with all of this, were also a massive amount of challenges. As was said earlier, I'm a theatre student, and doing that online was at times entertaining, but mostly quite horrible. So the main challenges for me as a visually impaired student is I would be working in my own space, practically as a theatre student doing, just theatre things. But I can't see my screen. It didn't work. The communication wasn't there. People would post things in the chat. I can't see them. And it was just this wall that is already created by the use of a virtual space for teaching was suddenly unclimbable. And there was just suddenly such a massive distance between myself and my colleagues. Yeah, let's go with colleagues.
Freya, can I just stop you for a minute, because there's a bit of background noise and we just want to make sure that, it may be coming from people around you, but if it's coming from somebody else who's got a microphone open, we're just asking everybody to make sure they're muted. But it might be that you've got background noise around you anyway.
Yeah, I do unfortunately have a bit of background noise.
That's okay.
Come out a lecture and everyone's like,
That's fine. Just so we don't spend time trying to find out who the offender is. We know it's you. That's fine.
No,
thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
That. No,
that's all right.
I do it at my house. I've not got any internet, which is again a massive issue.
Yeah.
An access issue.
So apologies for the interruption. I just wanted to try to make sure we lose as little as possible from you.
No, that is absolutely fine. And again, yeah, my apologies. So to overcome that wall that I was mentioning about this distance, things were done. For example, I would say our lecturers were quite compassionate. They understood the situation I was in as we were in as students. But I feel like any individual support for disabled students very much went, because of this, all of a sudden we were all in this sort of panic. But saying that, coming out of it and seeing what university should be like now, which is much different and much better, I will say, there are things that I think should stay. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, online lectures. And I'm also sort of advocating for the moment at keeping an online option for a certain amount of students per year group, per se, per course. Again, this is because for so many years before the pandemic, so many disabled students were advocating for the use of online learning, but being told that it wasn't possible, or it was too much effort, or it would cost too much. And as soon as it affected everyone, we were on it and it was amazing. But I think we need to keep this attitude of flexibility. I think it's something we can really, blended learning has become a term that I've heard a lot, sometimes a false promise, but sort of bringing in this element of flexibility so that education can be more accessible for everyone, I suppose. I mean, that's all I sort of really have to say on it as a topic. I'm more than willing to answer any questions. I don't know how you want to structure this.
That's really helpful. I think what we'll do, we will take questions, but I think we'll let those questions come in the final bit after Irene's spoken. But I've heard so many times that key thing you said there. For years we were asking for this, and it was always impossible, and then suddenly it's possible. So
yes,
I'll hand over to Irene now, if that's okay. Hi, Irene.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Irene, and I am a third-year maths student at the University of York. Also, my experience might be a little bit different in perspective, because I'm going to mainly talk about my experience last term when everybody was already in person, but I was still doing online learning. So my experience is a bit different, because it won't be the typical like, oh, we're all in pandemic, but we're still in pandemic, but some people are in, some people are not. So one of the aspects of remote and online learning I want to point out is compassion. As we were saying before, I had this beautiful example where I was the only student doing quantum mechanics remotely, and my lecturer didn't have an assignated classroom with audio and video recording. What he did, he found a small little webcam, he put it on his desk, and he made it look to the blackboard so that I could have that view and I could see how the classroom was working, because like, especially in science, you really need to see what your lecturer is writing. Otherwise, it's really hard to follow. Maybe if you're doing history or linguistics, is easier to follow if you're just listening. But when you're doing maths, physics, or any other science with a special notation, usually caption doesn't record it properly because they don't understand our symbols, and it makes everything slightly more complicated. So a few aspects from that we can learn as we move to in-person teaching is how looking at things in detail works. So sometimes we used to skip some steps, or we used to say something, and now that we know that we may have some students who are in isolation, we make sure that everything we do is written in the blackboards. Some lecturers are now taking pictures and they upload those pictures as we go through classrooms, so everybody can see the whiteboards, even if the lecture is not being recorded, which is still not ideal, but it still does make it a bit slightly better. Some of the things that we find most challenging was obviously engaging with students. And now I'm gonna go back to the normal pandemic times when we were all online, having the seminars run online. Not all the lecturers and not all the students had all the facilities to write. And again, sciences are a really hard topic to do. If you are doing them online, you cannot really talk through them. You have to see them, go through them. And not everyone had the facilities. Some students didn't have printers at home. Some students did not have a good scanner at home. And as a department rep, I've heard many stories and I've tried to solve all problems as much as I could. The use of technology obviously implements a lot of things for us and it helps a lot. And one of the things that we kept from COVID is that all of our assignments still being handed online, so in a digital format. So we hope that helps spread COVID, because like nobody's touching paper. You still get your comments. We still ask lecturers and PhD students to do them as detailed as possible, and our students are pretty happy with that. And if we had to do all it again, one of the things that I would probably make sure that we is that everybody can have access, and everything is first for everyone. Because like, if you didn't have an iPad, it's really hard when you are on an online teaching environment and you cannot write in what you're trying to say, then people don't get what you're really trying to say. Oh, where is this derivative coming from? Or where is this integral coming from? And you cannot really see it, you cannot really point it. So there's a clear disadvantage. But clearly, if we could find a way to equalize that and to make sure that everybody has enough resources to do it, I think that would be great. And obviously, in-person teaching has its pros and cons, and online teaching has its pros and cons. But I think especially for science, in-person teaching is actually one of the most efficient ways to deliver the resources and to deliver material information that we have for the course.
Thank you very much. Succinct and to the point. And again, as we've had with all our speakers, Irene, there are comments in the chat pane, comments for Freya as well as for you, and comments for all our speakers. So I think I hand over to Ron at this point. Oh, it's Ron and me together, but Ron, do you want to? You're muted at the minute.
Yeah, sorry, Alistair. It's our open mic session, so it's not really handing over to me, but it's an opportunity we'd encourage our guests, our presenters, to open their mics and video again, and questions and answers via the text chat, as well as anybody that wants to open their mic and ask a question verbally.
Could I ask a question? Oh, sorry, Rosemary. You can.
Maybe we could read out the questions that came in for Freya, or maybe the people could ask them. I think, Kenji, you had one, and apologies, I haven't noted who's
it's
the other
Corrie.
questions from. Corrie.
Corrie.
So would you like to maybe
That's
verbalize
telepathy.
those?
That's telepathy. That's exactly what I was going to say. You're brilliant.
Great minds, Alistair. Go on, Kenji.
Yeah, sorry, I was just clicking all the unmute things. So I suppose Freya had mentioned a continuation of online lectures would be advantageous. So that could be challenging for some, and a lot of people are looking to come back on campus and interact and have that physical interaction. Would recording, like mandating the recording of all lectures, be sufficient for you, or do you feel it needs more?
No, definitely. I think that's sort of what I didn't word it very well. That is very much what I meant. I know a lot of people who love the campus experience, and even if I go onto campus to view a lecture, I still may, if I find the time, go and then view it online afterwards, just to ensure that I got everything I needed to from that. I think it's just having options, and it's all about being flexible and creating as many options as we can within reason.
And Corrie had a question as well. If Corrie's still here, do you want to ask that?
Yeah.
Thanks, Corrie.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Freya. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a blended learning manager, and we're very cognizant of trying to ensure accessibility and inclusion in the use of all of these tools. It's a huge challenge and really important. And I was just wondering, you mentioned specifically about how the recorded lectures was really helpful for you and all the accurate transcriptions. And I wonder if there was anything else that were sort of specific takeaways in terms of maybe the way that the VLE is structured, or any other technologies that were challenging or particularly useful?
I think as long as you're sharing resources that are voiceover accessible and not overcomplicated, if that makes sense, like keeping the structure nice and clear. But again, for me, it's mainly, being able to voice over it. If I can voice over it, I'm in business. So things like Google Docs actually don't voice over very well, which is devastating. Unless somebody knows how to fix that, in which case please email me. But other than that, pretty much anything. And it's also, another advantage to it all has been being able to collaborate on digital documents, because if I do it on paper, I can't see it. So that part, I think, really needs to stay in learning.
And when you say collaborate on digital documents, do you mean like an Office 365 document or a different collaborative space?
Yeah, just anything like that. Office 365, Jamboards, unfortunately Google Docs, which isn't accessible, but anything where you can collaborate live has been really useful to me.
Great. That's really interesting. Thanks.
And just for people, if people aren't familiar with what VoiceOver is the screen reader on the iPad Mac platform, isn't it?
Yeah, any technology these days really tends to have one, or I've got like a specialist software that does it instead of that.
So a screen reader tool.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So this is the chance to put on your microphones, ask questions, keep them coming in the chat if you wish to.
Looks like Irene's got a hand up.
Irene.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to try to answer one of the questions that were in the chat. I think it was Genji. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, I'm really sorry.
It's right.
Oh, thank you. So the question was like, should university or your specific department tell you what kind of instruments you're gonna need, what type of specific things you're gonna need? Well, up to a certain point, sure, they can recommend, but I think university is already expensive enough for students to tell them, oh, you have to buy this specific laptop, or oh, you are gonna need an iPad. I don't think that's something that the university can impose to a student like that. So I know that from, because I remember I was implementing this when the time came in, because I was one of the student reps that was asked to work in this implementing sessions. There were laptops that you could rent, and the university was actually sending laptops to your house if you needed one. But to the point where the university is gonna buy enough iPads to like support all students, I don't think that's feasible in a close time limit. So I don't think that would be something that we could prepare for the next. Hopefully there will not be a next wave, but.
Yeah, those costs are set to go up as well. Okay, thank you. Deepika, we sorted your video now, I think. So
Yeah.
I can see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
I think Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah, I put it in the text chat, but I'll repeat it as well. One of the problems, and I don't know how it can be solved with kindness and compassion, is education is geared to be competitive. As an examiner, you have to grade students, and if you turn them over the first class, you will be thrown out of the university. The external examiners will throw you out. So you have to sort of follow this crazy distribution curve. And the students know this. So they have to be competitive. If they help each other, it's affecting their grades. There's also this issue with things like plagiarism and cheating. And it's come out in our university, people are saying, well, you've got to, students have problems. The only reason they cheat or plagiarize is because they've got social problems, or they might be working, they've got time constraints. So there's a problem of the conflict of interests of the teacher as an examiner and the teacher as a supporter. Once again, if you help one student more than the others, they can then complain about they weren't treated equally and fairly. So there is an underlying problem in education that's very difficult to address. And I'll be interested to know what people think is a solution to that.
I'm happy. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go?
No. Kindly, please. You go ahead.
I think I was just going to comment, maybe slightly passing the buck, but I was going to come because I agree. I think we live in these, we work in these environments that are but I think Theo Gilbert, I'm sure it was Theo that I referred to in my presentation, who writes about compassion within HE. I mean, I think he calls the university, he may be quoting someone else, but I think he calls it a theatre of cruelty because of the degree of competition. And I do think there is something, I mean, sorry, I might be, it might be, you may already be familiar with the area, Mike, but I think sort of certainly some of the reading around the sort of critical digital pedagogy area, certainly opened my eyes. There's a huge movement in terms of ungrading. We are certainly discussing in the institution, like the role of just pass fail at like the lower levels of study, and that these types of things around certainly the design of assessment, kind of in relation to some of these discussions about compassion. That's not removing competition ultimately. Like, I completely take on board what you're saying, but I think there's maybe there's a critical lens on some of this that I think is starting to shape some of the discussions about learning and teaching and the design of that learning and teaching, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Quickly come back that I taught in special schools and I taught in, universities, and I was always very aware of the unspoken. I also taught in teacher training colleges, and there's this unspoken thing about how much time you spend on each student. And do you spend more time on students who need the most help? Do you spend an equal amount of time on each student? Do you give more help to the students who are the brilliant ones who will change the world? And this is something that's personal to everybody, but it's never discussed.
That sounds like a topic for a bigger session than online learning.
I just want to
Deepika,
add something. I just want to add something. Right, like there was a previous question regarding grading, because we think that grading creates some type of tension among the students or learners. But if you heard about Bloom taxonomy, I think everybody must have heard about Bloom taxonomy, where they talked about the assessment of the learners on the basis of 3 domains, like cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. If we are focusing only on the grading on the mental faculties or the cognition part, then it creates the tensions. But if we talk about the performance or the skill or the other activities like co-curricular activities, where we have to provide the platform to the learners to collaborate, to perform dances, to perform collaborative music activities, art activities, and on the basis of that we are assessing them, then it would not create any kind of problem. Because here we have this system. We have internal assessment, we have external assessment, we have practical marks, we have to observe the learner on the platform, like we have to provide the platform to present their skill like dances, music, art, and so on. So there must be an amalgamation of all the skills, all the domains, cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Then that could be balanced approach. The student would not feel pressurized for the during grading system. So we are following here the same system, where we are grading the student on 3 bases, which balance the grading from cognition to skill performance.
Thank you for that, Deepika. I'm just popping in here because I've just come back in, but Irene, you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to comment on the conversation that Mike started, and I've never felt like competition and being kind to someone. I never feel that you have to choose between one or the other. You can be competitive and you can still be kind to your colleagues. I don't know if we're talking all of University of York. I don't know if we're here from many different universities. We have probably different departments involved, hopefully many different countries. And one of the things that I see is that in the UK, you have the system called rescaling. Where I come from, we don't have that system, but also exams are more consistent. So like you don't suddenly have an exam that is way harder than the exam on the previous year, and then you have to suddenly rescale so that you have a certain amount of first, a certain amount of 2-1s, and a certain amount of 2-2s. So yeah, that system definitely is going to create competitivity, but it still is not a problem. Sometimes we think about, and I'm going to talk department, we think of mathematicians as people who sit on their labs, do their maths, and not talk to anyone. Maths is actually one of the most social sciences, because when you're working on an assignment, there might be something that you don't see that your colleague will, and in order to get the full answer to the question, you're going to need both brains working on the same project to actually achieve what you're trying to achieve. And you can do that for assignments which are supposed to be formative, and on the day of the exam, it's completely up to you and your skills and your performance to do well on that exam. So you can still be kind, do the assignments together, work collaboratively, and still be competitive on the day of the exam. And that is completely up to you. So competition and kindness should not be opposing one another, that you don't have to choose between them. And at least something that has happened, or that I saw in pandemic, is that we had these Q&A questions. So you were giving this material, these resources that you can watch online on your own time, and then you will have 1 hour per week where you can go in and check with your with your module leader to talk about whichever topic that you find especially difficult in that fortnight period. And it happens that especially the people who don't need the help, those are the people who show up to those sessions. Those are the people who want to get more from that module. And the people who are falling behind, they sit down and they see themselves fall behind and they do nothing. But that is not up to the lecturer, it's up to the student to be like, oh, I'm falling behind, I have to go and get a checkup. So the lecturer gives the exact same options for everyone. It's up to the student to decide whether you want to take the hand or you want to leave it.
You should be a teacher.
Thank you. I think so as well sometimes.
That's brilliant. Passionate and grounded. Excellent. Just in terms of time, I think Denise has got her hand up and she's been waiting patiently. And then I think after that, Ron is probably, just for the purpose of the recording, Ron will finish off and then we can carry on the discussion after.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's a little bit.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
I'm going to turn the headset off and use the phone. Is that better?
That's good. Yeah.
Thanks. I work at Oxford University and I support the video lecture capture, and I was interested in hearing the students' point of view about the video quality and captioning and what's important to them. Thanks.
Okay. So captioning and captioning quality, 100% or is kind of 70%, 80%. Get viable, is that okay? So Irene and Freya, would you like to?
Yeah, if I could just jump in. I mean, if you're captioning a video, again, so there's loads of background noise, but if you're captioning a video word for word, it has to be 100%, because then, you know, that's a right to someone's education. If they couldn't hear you anyway, you need to make sure that they're getting the correct information. And in terms of quality of video, if it slides, then yeah, a better quality would be nice. But if it's, I mean, I'm visually impaired, video quality doesn't mean a lot to me, but you know, it's nice to have it and then make it as accurate as it possibly can be and as close to the real lecture as it can get.
And Irene, do you have?
For science, it's a bit hard because you cannot type an integral when you're doing captioning.
Yeah.
So for us, it's a problem that we know that we will always have unless someone suddenly decides to use LaTeX to include on the lecture capturing, which I don't think we haven't yet. But
well,
it's a problem we know.
I think all video captioning software should allow Greek symbols, and that would solve a lot of the problems, because, you know. So right now the recommendation is to type out the full gamma, G-A-M-M-A, because if you don't know the pronunciation of a symbol, you can't easily write it, type it, talk about it. So right now the recommendation is that you type out the full spelling of the Greek symbols. But then tools like Equatio, which is what I promote quite a bit at the university, allows us to select bit of maths and it reads back out to you, which is absolutely fabulous. But I think we do have to draw this out to a close and let Ron help us finish off the session.
Well, I've been putting the links in the text chat, but to summarize that very quickly, as a reminder that this is our main resource, and the links I put in the text chat is to the session today, but if you use the home button or the long list, there's the 19 topics that we're starting again from this one. On each page you will find the previous presentations and recordings from on those sessions. And as we go forward each month, you'll find the registration form for the next session and so on. That's not yet available for the next session, which is on flipped learning. But under the What Next panel here, we've got some kind of points, really, reminders of what you could do as a result of today's session. And the main one we wanted to point out to people is our new expression of interest form, where you can look through the list of topics and consider putting your name forward or suggesting a colleague does to sign up and be a guest speaker for one of our future topics, to share your experience. We've heard a lot about co-creation today. We're all learners as well as teachers, and really what we're encouraging the community to do, which is quite a large community now over the 4 or 5 years that we've been running these sessions, to really commit to that co-creation and to become a guest speaker to share your own experience for the next sessions. Anything to add, Lillian?
You can get a badge as well.
Oh yes,
indeed.
you get a badge for coming forward and speaking. We can't. Maybe they should call them digital stickers. You know, you still get stickers when you go to the dentist, don't you? If you're a young person. So I'm going to stop the recording here.